Welcome back to Modern Mystic Messages. I'm Teresa, and we're gonna keep on rocking. And yeah, y'all, we got to talk about that about television again. As a kid, certain things I always wondered. Got to go back, and one of them was about this whole television thing. Why was it so important? And truthfully, considering the fact of taxes and this and that and way things go, why was free television even ever a thing in the first place? Networks like the public networks and blah blah blah. Well, I mean, I get it that the advertising pay. That's how they say is paid for by the advertisers. But why do the advertisers have to do all of this? And then I went back and started looking at like the history of television and radio. I'm old enough that I remember when we were in school, they always played War of the Worlds and The Blob, because those were like early cinematographic radio pieces, whatever, that was supposed to be a part of Americana history. But here's the thing, if you got a radio show, why in the world would you think it's cool to do a radio? Now, yes, at the beginning of the program, they announced that it wasn't real at the very beginning. But back then, it wasn't no automatic start where you know it's not a streaming service. It's gonna pick up when you go in. When you turn on the radio, wherever they was at in the program, that's where you like today. So why would you ever think it was cool to have a radio program that was giving a, a detailed message of an alien invasion as told from the standpoint of latest breaking news given by a reporter? That's what that entire program was. It was like they were doing a regular weekly radio show, and then it gets broken into, and we have to have and the Martians and the people coming and screaming. They had literally had people so frightened that people actually jumped out of windows to their death over a radio show because the world wasn't ready for that. They've been planting that agenda of fear of alien invasion for 100 years. In 1910, there was an organization formed called the League of Nations. We know it today as the United Nations. One of the primary objectives of the forming of the League of Nations in 1910 was to provide a unified front and point of defense in the event of alien invasion. Why is it that the government wants us so terrified of alien invasion? And then in the 50s and 60s and 70s, when everybody and his third cousin was reporting seeing craft and crop circles and being abducted and all of those things, then the government said, oh, no, 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 that's not really happening. It's conspiracy theory. Y'all are crazy. Even when they had whole schoolyards full of children in Africa and Australia giving the same detailed accounts. They took them into rooms and questioned them separately. And all of the children reported the same thing of having these craft land and talking to individuals that descended out of those craft. And to this day, you can barely find clips about it. There's a few on YouTube if you dig properly for it. But don't nobody want to talk about it. But they still got people afraid of alien invasion all the while they've been steadily reverse engineering every craft they get their hands on, and will literally either imprison you or unalive you if you get too close to classified areas that are doing those kinds of experiments and research. Back to the TV. If you notice when television really became a thing, it was what we had. They had World War One going on, just coming out of the Depression and all that good stuff. And of course, they had to advertise for it and all that. But who made all that money? And why is it's really nice and convenient that World War One broke off just in enough time to be televised. They say that was the shot that was heard around the world. Since when does one dignitary in any given country being killed result in a world war. And then they televised it and put dramatic music to it, and all of the folks with the war effort came out, and America moved right on into the Industrial Revolution because they were right there ready with the Band-Aids. They had the weapons and the Band-Aids in great supply because the barons here had seen to it that they had already industrialized and got things mobilized for mass production to have that kind of thing happen. Those are the things that always made me say, Also of note, when they created television, they used those transistors back then, and they had a flicker rate for the picture tube. Like I said, I don't know what they got going on now, but back then, up until they went digital, televisions had the transistors in them. They could have chosen any flicker rate that they wanted. They chose a flicker rate that literally induced theta, especially in children under 7. You could put a child in front of a television and come back 5 minutes later, glassy-eyed stare, mouth open. That's they used to call it the idiot box because it would literally have people glassy-eyed and slack-mouthed in a pre-hypnotic state, and been using subliminal technology since forever, right there on TV. And if that don't happen, the imagery there's a lot of psychology that goes into what we watch because they know it shapes the minds of people. I wondered who decided that everybody in America want to see vampires and demons and people milking cows and goats with their mouth. Oh my. But that's what happened in 1999. Being pumped right into the agenda. All of the very public, high-profile murder trials and stuff all over. Oh, everybody needs and wants to know. Up until then, court dealings were supposed to be private. How come everybody wants and has a right to know and watch all of that stuff all day, every day, for months on end? Because it's a star that's involved. Because when we focus on something, we bring it into mass consciousness and mass reality. And then TV started pushing the whole narcissist agenda. That was pumped into here. And if you don't believe me, look at the history of I can't even say, because if I say one show, then it seems like I'm singling them out. But truthfully, you know the ones, all the dark-haired girls that grew up on television, mama single, can't none of them keep a man, all of them churning and burning through men like they water, most of them down with the swirl, and then sit there and mean girl, nice, nasty, mean girl, them dudes, talk about them like a dog while they're sitting around in some posh Rodeo Drive restaurant or whatever, or at their house, talking smack and eating, or pretending to eat salads or whatever it is that they do. We all know that show. If you got a television or a phone with YouTube on it, you've seen clips off of that show. And it looks fine when it's glamorous billionaires doing it. Don't play out so well in the real world, but that's what was beginning to be pumped into the reality, to be accepted as a way of life and a thing. And if you don't believe me that they use that for mass programming, that same show that is nameless right now pumped the other agenda of the whole gender thing and the cis women and all the rest of that. In 2018, or I think they spread over 2 seasons with the whole moral, mental dilemma of wanting to change, and then the cross-dressing started. And in 2018, that gentleman wearing a dress, because at that point was not surgical, was not under any kind of whatever, it was only cross-dressing. So that man was named Woman of the Year. And right after that, we went right on into 2020 and the paradigm shift where we had all these kids falling out the woodworks that then had gender reassignment surgery, even though I came from a paradigm up until I started hearing it happening in 2020. I was under the impression as it had been my whole adult life, the understanding that it was federally illegal for gender reassignment surgery to be done to anyone under the age, I believe it was 21, but for sure at least 18. That I don't know if they've erased everything through Mandela effect, but I'm trying to tell you, it was not a legal thing once upon a time before this recent timeline that we're on right now. But I knew that that was changing because them same reality shows had that show, I Am Jazz. And now Jazz sitting up in court in front of the Senate and the legislature and all of that, crying for people to make it stop because they weren't given accurate information. But this is what television and media has done with the full knowledge and blessing of the powers that were that's running that, because the population didn't decide that that's what they wanted to watch. They just gave it their stamp of approval by continuing to watch when it was pumped in mass into the reality. Every time we click on it and sit there and watch it, you're giving it your vote. What's that? Some young lady, and I'm not sure because I don't watch enough TV to know who's famous and what they're famous for, but I know she's supposed to be somebody because I've seen it on YouTube, the clips. But I love what she said. She said, everything you're not changing, you're choosing. Everything you're not changing, you're choosing. We complain about a lot of stuff, but we turn around and align with it by just going along with it, or, well, it is what it is. You're choosing it. We are powerful creators, and I'm beginning to understand that. But enough of that. We're going to jump on in here to the next part because that wasn't really on the personal, but I thought I would just cover some things that came up along that on the timeline as we get there. But we are going to continue on the next one, and I'll see you in a few.